I'm Amelia, 25, female, and my parents gave me an ultimatum to lose weight for my sister's wedding, only to despise me when my transformation led to a success they could never have imagined. It began, as most things did in my family, with my older sister, Jessica. Her life was a series of glittering events that our family calendar orbited around, and her wedding was set to be the supernova. For me, it was the black hole that threatened to swallow what little light I had for myself. The ultimatum wasn't delivered with shouts and fury. It was worse. It was delivered over a Sunday roast, with the casual, smiling cruelty that had become the hallmark of my family's communication style. My father, Richard, carved the beef with a surgeon's precision while my mother, Eleanor, refilled Jessica's wine glass, her eyes sparkling with matriarchal pride. "Amelia, darling," my mother began, placing a single, sad-looking boiled potato on my plate. "We were just talking about the wedding photos." I tensed, my fork hovering in the air. I knew this tone. It was the precursor to a gentle suggestion that felt more like a command. "They're going to be exquisite," Jessica chimed in, holding her wine glass up to the light. "The photographer is costing a fortune, but he's the best. He does all those high-fashion magazines." She glanced at me, her smile a little too tight. "And the dresses, they're a very specific cut, very ethereal." My father cleared his throat, setting the carving knife down. "What your mother and sister are trying to say, Amelia, is that we want everything to be perfect. It's an investment. These pictures will be on our walls for the rest of our lives." There it was, the slow, careful closing of the net. I was a problem to be solved, a variable that didn't fit their perfect equation. "The thing is, sweetie," my mother said, her voice dripping with feigned concern, "your bridesmaid dress. Well, in your current size, it just doesn't hang right. It throws off the whole line, the symmetry with the other girls." I looked from my mother's pitying face to my sister's impatient one. "So what are you saying?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Jessica sighed, as if my denseness was a personal burden. "What we're saying, Amy, is that we need you to lose some weight. It's 6 months until the wedding. That's plenty of time. Think of it as a motivational goal. We'll all be so proud of you." I felt the air leave my lungs. It wasn't about my health. It wasn't about me. It was about the line and the symmetry and the silent, screaming judgment of a photograph. I was to be the maid of honor, a title that now felt like a cruel joke. I was her only sister, yet my primary role was to be aesthetically pleasing. "If you can't, or won't," my mother added, her voice hardening just a fraction, "we'll understand. Of course you couldn't be maid of honor then, it would be too awkward. But you could still come as a guest." The threat hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Be smaller or be erased. This moment was just the culmination of a lifetime of similar cuts. Being Jessica's younger sister was like being a shadow. She was the sun, bright, loud, and effortlessly the center of everything. I was the moon, quieter, paler, and only visible when she wasn't around. Our childhood was a museum of her achievements. Her cheerleading trophies gleamed in a dedicated cabinet in the living room, while my debate club certificates and science fair ribbons were tucked away in a box in my closet. I remember when I got a perfect score on my SATs. I came home, bursting with the news, only to find the entire family celebrating because Jessica had been named prom queen. My father patted me on the head and said, "That's nice, dear," before turning back to help Jess decide which photo to submit to the local paper. Family vacations were planned around her whims. I once begged to visit the historical district in a city we were visiting, fascinated by its architecture. My parents exchanged a look, and Jess groaned, boring." The next day was spent at a sprawling outlet mall because Jess needed a new handbag. I spent hours sitting on a bench, feeling invisible, while they fawned over her purchases. The deepest cut came when it was time for college. My grades were impeccable, my application essays polished. I had my heart set on a university 3 states away that had an incredible library sciences program. My parents, however, balked at the cost. "It's just too much, Amelia," my father had said, shaking his head. "You can get a perfectly good education at the local community college and live at home. We have to be practical." 2 years later, when it was Jessica's turn, practicality went out the window. They happily co-signed enormous loans for her to attend an expensive private art school, celebrating her artistic spirit. The message was clear. She was an investment, I was an expense. Now sitting at that dinner table, ing at the congealing gravy on my plate, I felt that old, familiar weight settle on me, the weight of not being enough. Later that evening, I told my boyfriend, Ben, what had happened. I sat on the edge of his couch, recounting the conversation in a flat, emotionless voice. He listened patiently, his kind face etched with anger on my behalf. Ben was a high school history teacher, a man who saw the value in things others overlooked. He had fallen in love with me, not a version of me. He loved my mind, my quiet strength, my passion for the forgotten stories in old books. When I finished, he didn't say, "They're horrible," or "How could they?" He just pulled me into his arms, letting me bury my face in his chest. "Okay," he said softly, his voice a warm rumble against my ear. "So here's what I know. I know that you are the most beautiful woman I have ever seen, right now, exactly as you are. And I know that their approval is not worth the air it's printed on." He held me tighter. "So the only question that matters is, what do you want to do?" I cried then. For the little girl whose achievements were ignored, for the teenager whose passions were dismissed, and for the young woman who was just told she was an eyesore. And in the safety of his arms, a tiny, defiant spark ignited in the cold darkness of my shame. They wanted me to become smaller, fine, but I wouldn't do it for their photographs. I would do it for me. I would transform myself into someone so strong and so confident that their toxic opinions could never touch me again. The night after the ultimatum was a restless sea of hurt and anger. I tossed and turned, the smiling, judgmental faces of my family flashing behind my eyelids. Each word, symmetry, investment, if you can't, was a fresh sting. The shame was a physical thing, a heavy blanket that made it hard to breathe. It whispered that they were right, that I was a disappointment, that my very existence was an inconvenience to their picture-perfect world. By morning, the shame had curdled into a cold, hard resolve. I looked at myself in the mirror, truly looked, for the first time in a long time. I saw the puffy eyes, the slump in my shoulders, and the sadness that clung to me like a shroud. But beneath it, I saw that spark from the night before, still flickering. Ben was right. Their approval wasn't the prize. My own self-worth was. I called my mother that morning. My voice was steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside. "I'll do it," I said. A wave of triumphant relief washed through her voice. "Oh, Amelia, darling, I knew you'd see it our way. I am so proud of you for making this mature decision. Jessica will be thrilled." "I'm not doing it for you, or for Jessica," I said, the words tasting like freedom. "I'm doing it for me." There was a brief, confused silence on the other end of the line. "Well, of course, dear," she finally said, her tone a little strained. "Whatever helps you get motivated, the end result is what matters." But she was wrong. For me, the journey was about to become everything. That Saturday, I decided to face my first dragon, the gym. The thought of it filled me with a deep, paralyzing dread. I imagined a place full of impossibly fit people in coordinated outfits, all silently judging the newcomer who didn't know how to use the machines. Ben offered to come with me, but I knew this was a step I had to take alone. I chose a gym that was clean, bright, and not too crowded. Just walking through the glass doors felt like a monumental achievement. The air smelled of rubber and disinfectant. I paid for a 1-month membership, my hand trembling as I handed over my credit card. The receptionist gave me a blandly cheerful tour, pointing out the cardio machines, the weight area, and the class studios. It all felt like a foreign country where I didn't speak the language. My first workout was a comedy of errors. I got on a treadmill and, unsure of the controls, accidentally set it to a near-sprint pace, almost launching myself into the wall behind me. I tried a weight machine, mimicking a woman I'd seen nearby, only to realize halfway through a clumsy rep that I hadn't adjusted the seat and was contorting myself into a bizarre, painful position. Humiliation burned my cheeks. I retreated to the locker room after 20 minutes, my body slick with sweat and my spirit bruised. That evening, I almost gave up. I sat on my apartment floor, surrounded by takeout menus, the siren song of my old comfort habits calling to me. Just as I was reaching for the phone to order a large pizza, Ben knocked on the door. He didn't carry takeout. He carried grocery bags filled with lean chicken, vibrant vegetables, and brown rice. "Thought we could try a new recipe," he said with a gentle smile, sensing my fragility. He didn't lecture me or give me a pep talk. He just started washing vegetables, handing me a knife and a cutting board. We cooked together, the simple, collaborative AC. Tea soothing my frayed nerves. The meal was delicious, flavorful, and fresh. It wasn't a punishment, it was nourishment. "You know," he said as we ate, "the first time I taught a class, I dropped all my notes, mispronounced Magna Carta, and a kid in the back set off a stink bomb. I wanted to crawl into a hole and never come out." I looked at him, surprised. "Every new thing is hard," he continued. "You're learning a new skill, Amy. It's like learning a new language for your body. You're not going to be fluent on day one." His words were the lifeline I needed. The next day, I went back to the gym, and the day after that. I started small, walking on the treadmill at a steady pace and watching YouTube tutorials on my phone to learn proper form for basic exercises. I hired a personal trainer, a no-nonsense woman named Sarah who saw the fire in my eyes and didn't patronize me. She pushed me, but she also taught me. She explained the science behind muscle growth and fat loss, turning the intimidating machines into tools, and the gym into a laboratory for my own transformation. The hardest part was changing my relationship with food. For years, food had been my comfort, my friend, my way of coping with the casual emotional blows from my family. A bad day meant a pint of ice cream. A lonely evening meant a bag of chips. Now I had to unlearn those connections. I cleaned out my pantry, donating the processed, sugary snacks and replacing them with whole foods. I learned to meal prep, packing my lunches for the library every day. It was grueling. There were days my cravings were a physical ache. But with every healthy meal I chose, with every workout I completed, I felt that spark inside me grow a little brighter. I was taking control, one good decision at a time. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, but I knew, deep down, that it was also the best. The first few weeks bled into a month, then two. The calendar pages flipped closer and closer to Jessica's wedding day, but my motivation had undergone a profound shift. The wedding, once a terrifying deadline, was now just a date in the distance. My focus had shrunk to the present day, the present workout, the present meal. The initial agony of sore muscles and relentless cravings began to subside, replaced by a thrum of new energy. I started to notice the small things, the non-scale victories that Sarah, my trainer, told me to celebrate. One morning, I climbed the 3 flights of stairs to my apartment without feeling like my lungs were on fire. I reached for a book on a high shelf at the library and noticed the firm new line of muscle in my arm. I tried on an old pair of jeans and found they slid on easily, with room to spare. Each tiny victory was a deposit into my dwindling account of self-esteem. My family, of course, saw only the most superficial change. During our obligatory Sunday phone calls, my mother would ask, "So, how's the diet going?" As if it were a temporary, unpleasant task like cleaning out the garage. "I'm not on a diet, Mom," I'd explain for the 10th time. "I've changed my lifestyle." "That's nice, dear. Well, whatever you want to call it, it's working." Jessica and I were saying how much more refined you looked in that picture you sent. The picture was a selfie I'd sent to a group chat, feeling proud of the newfound definition in my collarbones. Their praise felt hollow, like they were complimenting a piece of furniture they'd had reupholstered to better match the drapes. They never asked about my workouts, my energy levels, or how I was feeling. They only cared that their aesthetic project was proceeding on schedule. It was Ben who gave me the idea. One evening, I was excitedly explaining the science behind macronutrients to him, drawing a makeshift diagram on a napkin. He watched me, his expression full of warmth. "You light up when you talk about this stuff, Amy," he said. "You're so passionate and you're so good at explaining it. You should share this with people." "Share it how?" I asked. "Stand on a street corner and preach about the virtues of kale." He chuckled, "No, you should start a blog or an Instagram page. Just share your story. The recipes, the struggles, the things you're learning. I bet there are thousands of people out there who feel just as lost as you did." The idea was terrifying. It felt arrogant to assume anyone would want to hear from me, but the thought planted a seed. My family didn't want to hear about my journey, but maybe someone else would. Maybe my story could be for someone else what I had needed 6 months ago, a sign that change was possible. So I did it. I created a simple blog and an anonymous Instagram account. I called it The Librarian's Ledger, a nod to my old life and my new, more balanced one. My first post was short and honest. I wrote about feeling intimidated at the gym, about my emotional connection to food, and about my decision to change for myself, not for anyone else. I ata. Ched a photo of my new running shoes next to a stack of books. I didn't mention my family or the wedding. This space was for me. I posted a picture of the healthy shepherd's pie I'd made, including the recipe. I wrote about the triumph of doing my first full push-up. I shared a post about the importance of rest days, admitting that my first instinct was to feel guilty for not working out. I was unflinchingly honest about the hard days, the moments I wanted to quit, and the strategies I used to keep going. For a few weeks, my only follower was Ben. Then I got my first comment from a stranger. A woman named Karen wrote, "Thank you for this. I feel the exact same way about the gym." Soon I had 10 followers, then 50, then 100. People started messaging me asking for advice, sharing their own struggles. They were a world away from my family's sterile compliments. They saw the work, not just the result. They cheered for the push-up, not just the smaller dress size. My family remained blissfully unaware of my little corner of the internet. Their interactions with me continued along the same shallow track. Jessica called one afternoon, her voice frantic. "Amy, I need you to come with me for the final bridesmaid dress fitting on Saturday," she said. "Oh, I'm sorry, Jess, I can't," I replied. "I have my certification exam for my nutrition course then." There was a beat of silence. "You're what? What are you talking about?" "I've been taking an online course to become a certified nutritionist," I explained, a bubble of pride in my chest. "The exam is this weekend." "A nutritionist?" She let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "That's a bit random, isn't it? I mean, it's great that you're into salads now, but isn't that a bit much? Well, I guess you'll have to reschedule your little test. This fitting is important." "I can't reschedule it, Jess," I said, my voice firm. "It's the only date it's offered. I can come another time, or you can go with Mom." Her sigh was heavy with martyrdom. "Fine, I guess I'll have to handle it myself, as usual. Some maid of honor you are." She hung up before I could reply. The conversation left a bitter taste in my mouth, but it didn't deflate me the way it once would have. I had my exam to study for. I had a community of people waiting for my next post. I had a life that was beginning to feel truly my own, and it was far more interesting than the role they had assigned to me. The month before the wedding was a whirlwind. I passed my nutrition certification exam with flying colors, the official certificate arriving in the mail feeling more valuable to me than a diamond. My physical transformation was now impossible to ignore. I had lost over 50 pounds, but it was more than that. I stood taller. My eyes were bright, my skin was clear. I had traded the library's quiet halls for the gym's energetic pulse, and my passion for my new field was a fire that warmed me from the inside out. The real shock, however, came from my online world. My little blog, my secret haven, was about to go supernova. It happened because of a post I almost didn't write. It was the anniversary of the ultimatum dinner, and I was feeling reflective. I sat down and wrote a piece called "On Whose Terms." I wrote about the societal pressure on women, especially around big events like weddings. I didn't name my family, but I wrote with raw honesty about how it felt to be told your body wasn't acceptable, and how I had reclaimed that narrative for myself. I wrote that the ultimate transformation wasn't in my dress size, but in the realization that my worth was not up for debate. I ended it with, "You are not a before picture. You are a complete work of art, at every stage of your life." I hit publish and went to bed, thinking nothing more of it. I woke up to a digital earthquake. My phone was buzzing incessantly, a frantic, vibrating brick on my nightstand. When I finally looked at the screen, I gasped. My post had been shared, not just by a few people but by thousands. It had been picked up by a major online women's magazine, then a celebrity wellness guru. My Instagram follower count, which had been a respectable 5,000, was climbing at a dizzying rate. 10,000. 25,000. By noon, it had surpassed 50,000. My inbox was flooded. There were messages from women who had been through similar experiences, thanking me for giving their pain a voice. There were emails from small, ethical fitness brands, companies that sold sustainable activewear and all-natural supplements, offering me partnerships. Not just free products, but actual, paid collaborations. A literary agent messaged me, asking if I had ever considered turning my blog into a book. I sat on my couch, scrolling through it all with Ben, my heart pounding with a mixture of terror and exhilarating joy. "What is happening?" I kept whispering. "What's happening?" Ben said, beaming. "Is that the world is finally seeing what I've seen all along." TH. At week, I quit my job at the library. It was a scary leap, but my fledgling coaching business, born from my blog, now had a waiting list. The income from my first couple of brand deals was more than I made in 2 months as a librarian. For the first time in my life, I was not just emotionally, but financially independent. I wasn't just surviving, I was on the verge of thriving. The tipping point with my family came, as it always did, with Jessica at the epicenter. She discovered my blog. A friend sent it to her. My phone rang and it was her. No hello, no preamble, just a cold, sharp, "What is the librarian's ledger?" My blood ran cold. It's my blog," I stammered. "Your blog," she repeated, her voice dripping with venom. "The one where you write about our toxic family and my wedding to get attention from strangers on the internet." "I never said it was you. I never mentioned anyone by name," I defended, my heart hammering. "Oh please, Amelia. A family event, pressure to fit into a dress. You might as well have used our names and social security numbers. My friends are sending this to me, asking if it's about us. You're embarrassing me." "I'm embarrassing you," I was incredulous. "You're the one who told me I'd ruin your photos." "That was a private family matter," she shrieked. "You had no right to air our dirty laundry to the entire world just so you could get a few free sports bras." The sheer hypocrisy of it was stunning. They had created the wound, and now they were furious that the scar was visible. That evening, my mother called. Her tone was one of deep, sorrowful disappointment. "Amelia, I just don't understand your motivation," she said, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. "We were so proud of your weight loss. You looked so lovely at your dress fitting. Why would you ruin it by turning it into this? This public spectacle, it's cheap." "My career is not a public spectacle, Mom," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "I'm helping people. I'm building a business." "It's a phase," my father chimed in on the extension. "This internet fame, it's fleeting. You've thrown away a stable job with a pension for a hobby." The narrative was clear. My success wasn't real. My confidence was an act of aggression. My newfound independence was an attack on the family. They could handle skinny Amy, the compliant project who did as she was told. They could not, under any circumstances, handle successful Amelia, the woman who had built a life and a career out of the very pain they had inflicted. The battle lines had been drawn, and I was standing on the other side, alone but for the first time not afraid. The family's reaction to my success was like watching milk curdle. The initial shock soured into a thick, lumpy resentment. The condescending praise vanished completely, replaced by a campaign of passive aggression so finely tuned it could have been an Olympic sport. They couldn't directly attack my success without looking petty, so they tried to chip away at its foundations, hoping the entire structure would collapse. The backhanded comments became their weapon of choice. At our now tense Sunday dinners, which I only attended to maintain a fragile peace for Ben's sake, the digs were relentless. "Don't you think you're overdoing it with this internet thing? Alina would ask, passing me a salad bowl with a pointed look. It's important to have a real life, too, Amelia. My father, Richard, would peer at me over his reading glasses. Is that really a stable career? All those online businesses seem like silly pyramid schemes to me. You had a pension at the library, you know, a real, tangible benefit. Jessica, however, was the master of the craft. She would talk loudly about her wedding plans, her voice laced with manufactured stress. It's just so much work, planning a real event, you know. I'm so busy with actual vendor meetings and contracts. I wish I had time to just play on my phone all day like some people. They tried to belittle my work at every turn. My coaching clients were vulnerable people you're taking advantage of. My brand partnerships were selling out. My blog was my little diary. They were trying to shrink my accomplishments back down to a size they were comfortable with, to put me back in the box of Amy, the quiet younger sister with the quaint little hobby. When the subtle digs didn't work, they moved on to active sabotage. It started with food. Knowing I was in the final, crucial weeks of my fitness plan before the wedding, they began to weaponize meals. One Sunday, Alina prepared an elaborate, artery-clogging feast of all my old favorites: creamy lasagna, garlic bread dripping with butter, and a decadent chocolate fudge cake. "I made all your favorites, darling," she announced, beaming as she placed the steaming dish of lasagna in front of me. "A little treat for all your hard work." "It looks delicious, Mom, but I can't, Aid politely, I'll just have the salad." Her face fell, a mask of theatrical hurt. "Oh, I see. My cooking isn't good enough for you anymore, now that you're a health guru." Jessica smirked. "Don't take it personally, Mom. Amelia probably has to go photograph her lettuce for her followers." The air was thick with tension. Ben, who had been quiet until now, put his fork down. "Alina, Amy's meal choices are her own. She's been incredibly disciplined, and you should be proud of that, not trying to trip her up." My mother looked at Ben as if he'd just sprouted a second head. "Well, I was only trying to be nice." My father glared at Ben. "This is a family matter, Ben. I think you should stay out of it." From that day on, Ben was no longer seen as my supportive partner, but as a bad influence who was encouraging my rebellious phase. The sabotage bled into the wedding preparations. Jessica conveniently forgot to include me in the group chat with the other bridesmaids, leading to me missing a key scheduling change for the bachelorette party. When I called her on it, she was breezily unapologetic. "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. With a million things to do, your name just slipped my mind. You've been so busy with your blog anyway, I figured you wouldn't want to come." The message was clear: you have a life outside of us. Fine, then you don't get to be part of this. The lowest blow came from my own mother. She called me one afternoon, her voice agitated. "Amelia, your Aunt Carol saw your blog. She called me, very concerned. She said you look gaunt. She thinks you've developed an eating disorder." I was stunned into silence. "Gaunt? I'm the healthiest I've ever been in my life. I'm strong. I'm not starving myself, I'm nourishing my body." "Well, that's not how it looks to others," she said, her voice taking on a righteous tone. "People are worried. Maybe you should take a step back from all this extremism. All I want is for you to be healthy." It was the most twisted piece of gaslighting I had ever experienced. The very people who had forced me into this journey were now trying to frame my success as a sickness. The irony was so bitter it almost choked me. They hadn't wanted me to be healthy. They had wanted me to be compliant. My health, my success, my confidence, these were terrifying to them. They were a reflection of everything they weren't: brave, disciplined, and authentic. They couldn't celebrate my light, so they were doing everything in their power to extinguish it. But they were too late. The fire was already burning too brightly. The final ambush came a week before the wedding. The pretext was finalizing last-minute details. Jessica called me, her voice unnaturally sweet, and asked if I could come over to our parents' house. "Just a quick family meeting," she'd said, "to make sure we're all on the same page for the big day." Ben offered to come, a protective glint in his eyes. "I don't like this, Amy. It feels like a trap." I know, I'd said, squaring my shoulders. But I need to face this. I can't keep hiding from them. I walked into my parents' living room, and the scene was set like a courtroom. My father sat in his high-backed armchair, the judge's seat. My mother was perched on the edge of the sofa, a nervous prosecutor. And in the center of the room, pacing back and forth, was Jessica, the star witness and plaintiff. The air was thick with unspoken accusations. Amelia, thank you for coming, my father began, his voice laced with a grave seriousness that was utterly absurd. Jessica stopped pacing and whirled to face me. Her face was pale and her eyes were red-rimmed. The performance had already begun. How could you? She whispered, her voice cracking. How could I what, Jess? I asked, keeping my own voice level and calm. Her volume shot up. How could you do this to me? This was supposed to be my time, my one day, my wedding, and you have systematically made it all about you. I stood my ground, refusing to be drawn into her melodrama. I have done nothing but what you all asked me to do. What we asked you to do was lose a little weight so you wouldn't look out of place in a dress, she shrieked, tears now streaming down her face in a perfect camera-ready display. We didn't ask you to become some kind of internet celebrity. We didn't ask you to write sob stories for attention. Every time I talk to someone about my wedding, they ask me about your blog. My caterer asked for one of your recipes. My own day, and I'm being upstaged by my little sister's diet plan. It was all out in the open now, the ugly, writhing core of their resentment. It had never been about aesthetics or health. It was about attention. I had stolen her spotlight, and that was the one unforgivable sin. My mother rushed to Jessica's side, wrapping an arm around her. She looked at me, her face a mask of disappointment. Your sister has a point, Amelia. You've been very self-absorbed through TH. Is whole process. We just want a normal, peaceful wedding. We think it's for the best, my father said, delivering the final verdict, if you shut down your social media. All of it, just until after the honeymoon. It's the least you can do for your sister to give her back her moment. He leaned forward, his expression severe. It's about family, Amelia, not followers. And in that moment, something inside me snapped. Not with a loud, violent crack, but with a quiet, clean break. The chains of guilt and obligation that had bound me to them for 25 years simply fell away. I looked at the three of them, my weeping sister, my coddling mother, my stern father, and I didn't see family. I saw three deeply insecure people who were so terrified of my light that they would rather see me in darkness. I took a deep breath. My voice, when I spoke, was devoid of anger or tears. It was the calm, clear voice of a woman who finally knew her worth. No, I said. The single word hung in the air, stunning them into silence. No, my father repeated, blinking as if he'd misheard. No, I said again, more firmly. I will not be shutting down my business. I will not be hiding my success. I will not make myself smaller to make you more comfortable. Let's be very clear about what happened here. You gave me an ultimatum. You told me my body was not acceptable for your event. You handed me a deep and profound hurt, and you expected me to just swallow it. Well, I didn't. I took that hurt and I forged it into strength. I built a life and a career that I am incredibly proud of. This success is not an attack on any of you. It's my triumph. And if you can't see that, if all you can see is a threat to your own egos, then that is your failing, not mine. I looked directly at Jessica, whose tears had stopped, her face now a canvas of pure shock. I'm sorry you feel upstaged, Jess, but my life is not a strategic campaign to steal your thunder. It's just my life. I will be at your wedding. I will stand up there as your sister, but my participation in this toxic, manipulative drama is over. As of right now. I didn't wait for a response. There was nothing more to say. I turned around, walked out the front door, and didn't look back. I got into my car where Ben was waiting in the passenger seat. He didn't say anything, just reached over and took my hand. And as I drove away from the house I grew up in, I felt a profound sense of loss, but also an exhilarating rush of freedom. The war was over, and I had finally won. The morning of Jessica's wedding was bright and clear. As I got ready, I felt a strange sense of calm. The anxiety that had plagued me for months was gone, replaced by a quiet, solid certainty. I wasn't getting ready for them anymore. I was dressing for me. The bridesmaid dress, the one that had been the catalyst for this whole ordeal, now fit perfectly. It was a soft, sage green chiffon, and against my healthy skin, and with my newfound confidence, it looked beautiful. But as I zipped it up, it felt less like a costume for their play and more like armor. Ben drove me to the venue, a sprawling country club with manicured lawns and fountains. He was dressed in a sharp suit, my handsome, steadfast anchor in this stormy sea. Before I went to join the bridal party, he pulled me aside. "Remember who you are," he said softly, tucking a stray piece of hair behind my ear. "You are not the person they tried to make you. You're the person you fought to become. I am so ridiculously proud of you." He kissed me, and that kiss was all the validation I needed. Entering the bridal suite was like stepping into a different dimension. The air was thick with hairspray and forced gaiety. Jessica was in the center of the room, a vision in white, but her eyes were hard when they landed on me. My mother and the other bridesmaids fluttered around, their laughter a little too loud. "Amelia, you're here," my mother said, her voice strained. There was no warmth, no "you look beautiful." I just smiled politely. Of course, wouldn't miss it. The day proceeded in a series of surreal, detached moments. I fulfilled my duties with a professional sort of grace. I held Jessica's bouquet. I straightened the train of her dress. I smiled for the photographs, a genuine smile this time, because my happiness was no longer dependent on their approval. I could see the photographer, the expensive one they'd hired, directing them, and I felt a pang of pity for the girl I used to be. The girl who would have been dying inside, believing her worth was tied to the composition of these photos. During the reception, I circulated, speaking to relatives who offered a mix of reactions. Some, like my Aunt Carol, gave me a wide berth, whispering behind their hands. Others, cousins my age, pulled me aside. "Amy, you look incredible," one whispered. "I've been following your blog, don't let them get to you." It was a small comfort, a reminder that not everyone in my family was blinded by jealousy. My final interaction with Jessica sealed the end of our old relationship. She found me standing by the gift table, looking out at the sunset. "Well, you got what you wanted," she said, her voice low and bitter. "You're the star of the show. Half the guests have complimented me on your transformation." I turned to face her, my expression calm. "This isn't a competition, Jess. I'm just living my life. I am happy for you today. I hope you have a wonderful marriage." She searched my face for any sign of malice or sarcasm, and finding none, she seemed deflated. She didn't know how to fight someone who refused to pick up a weapon. She just shook her head and walked away, back to her party, back to the spotlight she so desperately craved. And I felt nothing but a sad finality. Ben and I didn't stay until the end. We slipped out after the cake was cut, a quiet, unnoticed exit. We got in the car, and I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for a year. "Where to?" Ben asked. "Let's go celebrate," I said. He took me to a beautiful restaurant downtown, one with sparkling city views. We ordered champagne. We didn't talk about my family or the wedding. We talked about the future. We talked about the book proposal my agent wanted me to write. We talked about a trip we could take. We talked about our life together. Later that night, I posted a photo on my Instagram. It was a picture of Ben and me, our champagne glasses raised in a toast, the city lights twinkling behind us. The caption didn't mention a wedding or a bridesmaid dress. It simply said, "Here's to new beginnings, to writing your own story, and to celebrating every single victory. You are worth it." The likes and comments poured in, a wave of love and support from my true community. I had walked through fire, and on the other side, I'd found myself. I had to lose the conditional, suffocating love of my family to finally discover the unconditional, liberating power of loving myself. And that was a transformation no photograph could ever capture. So, what do you think? Was I right to distance myself from my family, or should I have tried harder to make them understand?